Hi and welcome to Rhonda London Live. On the show today, Ontario's proposed privacy legislation. Critics are outraged. They maintain the legislation will result in easy access to personal health information. Activists are worried that if medical records become widely available, it will be easy to find out who suffers from everything from depression to AIDS. That means the potential is there for employers to use that information against employees or even prospective employees. In spelling out who can have access to patient records, the bill names the health minister as well as healthcare professionals, hospitals, health clinics, and nursing homes. It also allows researchers to view those private records and health ministry officials in, quote, the management of the health system. Today on the show, we'll talk to Ontario's Privacy Commissioner, Dr. Cavoukian, about this. And as always, the phones will be open to take your calls so you can voice your thoughts. Don't go away. We're back right after this. It's a prospect that has privacy advocates frightened. Under planned legislation in Ontario, the government will essentially be able to reach in and take the medical files of anyone in the province. Critics say the bill will mean that individuals will have little control over the collection, use, and disclosure of their own personal health information. Joining us in studio, Dr. Cavoukian. She's Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner. She's also the author of the book, Who Knows? Safeguarding Your Privacy in a Networked World. Anne, thank you so much for joining us.
Rhonda, it's my pleasure to be on your show.
Your thoughts on this piece of legislation, or this proposed piece of legislation, because you've been pretty outspoken on the subject.
Yes, well, I felt I had to be. I mean, Bill 159, as it's called, is a seriously flawed bill. There's no question. It allows for far too many uses of your personal health information without your consent, and that to us is clearly unacceptable. But having said that, I haven't called for completely scrapping the bill, because my fear is that if we don't take this opportunity now to craft a good, strong, privacy protective health bill, we may not have any health legislation for years to come. And the reason, if I can just put this in some context, Justice Horace Creever, in his report on the confidentiality of health information dating back to 1980, said we had to have privacy laws for health information at that time. It's 2001. Over 20 years have passed and nothing has been introduced. And the reason, one of the reasons, is it's extremely difficult legislation to get right. Different governments have introduced legislation or have attempted to introduce legislation during the past 14 years since the inception of my office and have failed to be successful at it because there are so many competing interests that you have to balance. So my fear is that this is the closest we've ever come. There's actually a bill that's been introduced in the House, a flawed bill, but I think we can completely revamp it in an effort to make it privacy protective.
But isn't this legislation supposed to protect your privacy?
Well, that's the theory, isn't it? And it is called a personal health information privacy bill. But the fear is that it may just serve as an instrument to legitimize third-party disclosures of your personal health records. And clearly, that's not acceptable. It would do the exact opposite than protect your privacy. One of the problems, Rhonda, is that right now, there's nothing in place to protect your health information records. I mean, we have privacy laws now for the private sector federally. So information that you give online may have stronger privacy protection than your health records. It's just not acceptable. And a legislated right of access to your health records doesn't exist right now. So if you need to access a file, if you need to have something corrected, that can't be done. So one of the things that we're seeking in this legislation is to ensure that in addition to access to your health records, you will retain the ability to correct your information in the event that there are inaccuracies noted. It's a very important right to preserve.
How frightening is it that we don't have legislation in place right now, particularly since the Ontario government is moving towards the implementation of so-called smart cards, where all of your health information will be held on a single card about the size of a credit card?
If I can just add a little bit of information about that, because I think there has been a great deal of misinformation. From what I understand, the government isn't contemplating storing your medical record on the smart card. There are many reasons for it. It's extremely difficult, and it's extremely difficult to maintain a full and complete record on it. So right now, the only purpose that it's being contemplated for actively is to replace your existing OHIP card and have some perhaps additional information on it that will be used in the event of emergency, such as your blood type, allergic reactions.
If you're allergic to penicillin.
Yes, and an ambulance comes and you're unconscious. And that would be with your consent. So the fears associated with the smart card, I think, are largely fictitious at this point. We have been monitoring the development of this project very closely. We have been consulted extensively. So my fears associated with that are minimal. My concerns with the absence of privacy laws for health information are much greater, because as it stands now, if this bill doesn't get seriously revised and reintroduced, then the status quo will prevail. And the status quo is namely that there are no legislated protections for your health information.
And if I was properly motivated and if I was willing to spend a few dollars, how easy or how difficult would it be for me to find out your personal health information? There are private companies that exist right now that will, you can pay them a fee and they'll find out.
There are many ways to access people's information without their consent, as you know. So it may not be that difficult, unfortunately. I have to say that the government of Ontario has protected health information. Over the years that I've been in this position, we have not received complaints in that regard. So I don't think the problems are emanating out of the Ministry of Health. However, there are many individuals who you can hire, like a private investigator. They go online. There is such a breadth and wealth of information, unfortunately, that you have no control over. And maybe I can return to that point. Privacy, especially in this area relating to your health records, relates to control. Your control, an individual's ability to control the uses of their personal information. And this is what privacy hinges on. It's extremely important that we maintain that notion of control under any bill introducing health information privacy.
Why is it so important to protect your personal information, particularly your personal medical information?
Imagine that it gets into the wrong hands. There's a lot of health information, some of which may simply be embarrassing, but others which may have actual adverse consequences to employment that you're seeking, or you want to get accommodation in a particular type of building. It's no one else's business. The information is used for the purposes of obtaining treatment for health purposes. So when it's used in a non-health related application, it can be used in ways that could harm you. And that's totally unacceptable. This area of information, more than any other area, is extremely sensitive and must be, with limited exceptions, under your control. And that's what we're seeking.
What kind of scenario could you foresee where the information is misused?
Well, I'll just raise the specter of genetic testing. And we've heard a great deal about the Human Genome Project this week, and it's a remarkable effort. My fear is that the applications of genetic information outside of the health treatment context could be devastating. It could lead to discrimination in the workplace. It could lead to insurance discrimination. But some people have speculated that ultimately it could lead to an entire class of people who are unemployable and uninsurable. Now imagine that.
Just because of their genes.
Because of their genes. How that could transform society. What do you do with people who are unemployable? Because their genetic information, and I should say often just pointing to a predisposition towards a particular trait or a medical condition. It hasn't been confirmed. There are no symptoms associated with it. So just a possible predisposition towards a particular condition may lead to this kind of discrimination. What do you do in the long run with people who can't be employed for this reason? It's unthinkable, because as at a societal level, we have to grapple with these issues. So where you start with genetic information, for example, is what's taken place in the United States. A number of states have legislated that employers and insurers can't even ask the question. They can't pose the question, have you had any genetic testing done? Because in posing the question, let's say you're applying for a job, then you could be pressured or coerced to provide the results of the testing.
Wow, that's frightening.
It can be very frightening. And that is something I think that if we act quickly, because it's still at the early stages, we can introduce laws, as they have done in a number of states, to prohibit that kind of collection of inappropriate genetic testing.
I could see, even as because we're in a vacuum, because there isn't any legislation right now, let's say if you had breast cancer, yes, and you were declared cancer-free and you wanted to change jobs, if your prospective employer found out that you had cancer, you might be a potential health risk, they might not hire you.
Absolutely.
And that could be happening right now.
And your prospects for advancement in the workplace. Mm-hmm. If someone knew that you had a gene that made you susceptible for heart disease, they would step aside and say, get someone else, mm-hmm, for that position, because the possibility that you may have a heart attack in years to come would prevent them from wanting to groom you into this position that they're advancing you into. So there are a number of concerns associated with this, both in terms of workplace and in terms of advancing within the workplace, new jobs, existing jobs. Is
it possible, though, particularly given the advent of technology, even to protect our privacy? Is it doable?
Of course, and I say of course not lightly. Let me put it this way, we can't throw it away at this point in time. It's far too early. There are a number of technologies being developed that will aid in our efforts to protect privacy. There are a number of laws that are being introduced, so we can seek legislative controls, technical controls, procedural controls on the uses of one's information. I think in the short run it's a very difficult task, because I think we're at a time, especially with the internet and the World Wide Web, where information is being amassed and circulated at an ever-increasing pace. But we are very much in the infancy of privacy protection. This is just beginning to see the light of day. So I'm still very optimistic. Other people would throw in the towel and say, well, forget about it. It's too late. It's not too late. We're just starting. But I caution people, individuals, to the extent that you can control how much information you release willingly to people when you buy something, when you're asked for information, don't do it. I mean, it has to start with the individual. At the very first instance, trying to contain the disclosure of information, unless they choose to do so. Again, it's the notion of control.
Well, we've talked about that before on the show, and the fact that sometimes if you go and buy a set of batteries at a certain retail outlet, and they practically ask, I mean, they don't ask for your social insurance number, but they ask for your address and your postal code and your phone numbers just to buy a set of batteries. Should people just refuse?
Just don't do it. You think they're not going to sell you the batteries? and I think they sometimes might make you feel that way, that, well, we have to have that information. And if you challenge them, and I think this is the extra step that people are reluctant to do, and understandably, if you challenge them and say, no, I'm not going to give you that information, they're not going to not accept your money. They want your business. But we're a very polite society, I think, in Canada, which is a lovely attribute, except that occasionally it prevents us from asking that additional question, why do you need that information? And you can do it very politely. I always tell people, you can do it politely, but whenever I've done it, I would say 9 out of 10 times, I don't have to give the information, because it's really not necessary to the purchase or the transaction.
Okay, I want to talk to you more about that, but first we have to take a commercial break. Phone lines are open right now. I want to hear your thoughts on this issue today. The number to call is 905-332-3131 or 416-203-0302. Welcome back to Rhonda London Live. You may be surprised to find out just how public your private life has become, particularly in the advent of modern-day technology. We're talking about privacy issues today. The number to call is 905-332-3131 or 416-203-0302. Want to hear your thoughts on the subject or your concerns? We're joined in studio by Dr. Cavoukian. She is Ontario's Privacy Commissioner. Before we went to commercial break, we're talking about this proposed legislation in Ontario that is supposed to protect your privacy, at least your health records, but you have some big concerns over it. My concern, and I think most people would be horrified to learn this, is that for years the Ontario government has been selling our private information gathered through the Ministry of Transportation and has been selling it to private individuals and businesses.
Absolutely. It's a revenue generator for the government. And this is something that the public has very little knowledge of. And every once in a while, it'll come out in the media, and people will be horrified, and there'll be an exchange of letters. It's never been changed. It's something we've discussed on a repeated basis with the Government of Ontario, and discussions are still ongoing. But it's not against the law, and that's the problem. We have very limited control over what the government can do with this type of information. So we work with them, we try to place controls on how much of it they can use, and it's a battle. It's an ongoing battle.
But imagine, though, your most private information given to the government, and the government should certainly be the guardian of your personal information, and the government should be our protector.
Absolutely.
You give them this private information through the Ministry of Transportation in order to have a valid driver's license or to register your vehicle, as every law-abiding citizen is bound to do. Yes. And then to find out that they're selling that private information, that is horrific.
That's right. It's a removal of trust, because you assume that there's a duty of care. You are entrusting the government with your personal information, for which they have a responsibility to safeguard it and ensure that they treat it in a way that you are aware of, and sale of information isn't contemplated in that relationship.
There's no consent.
There's no consent, not to the sale.
So how comfortable then should we be giving the government our private medical information? Because this piece of draft legislation, and although the government says this is just the first draft and it's subject to change, as a matter of fact, there's upcoming hearings for public input on this piece of legislation. But how can we trust the government, who is already selling our private information, because this law allows researchers to access your medical records?
My greatest concern with the bill, Rhonda, is relating to the section it's called directed disclosures, where the Minister of Health can direct any health custodian to disclose to him any health information. So what that would mean is it would extend the reach of the Ministry of Health into your personal chart, your medical files with your doctor, which would be unthinkable. So those are the areas that we're trying to rein in a dramatic way.
How do you gauge, though, the political will? Do people even, and it's a question for our viewers. How important is privacy? We call it a right to privacy, but do we really have that right?
It is a right. The extent to which the right is upheld depends on the political will and the ability of my office, for example, as the oversight agency for the public sector privacy laws, to successfully investigate situations that may be breaches of the law. We have very limited powers in our ability to investigate complaints that we receive, and that's a huge problem which we've raised with the government in the past. In this area, it's extremely important. I mean, they often say that a privacy law is only as effective as the strength of the oversight agency to ensure compliance with that law. So we're also pressing the government to ensure that we have the sufficient powers to ensure that we can oversee it properly. And right now we don't. The bill is also flawed in that respect. We have very limited investigatory powers. So we would not be able to investigate complaints properly.
Wow. Well, our phones are ringing. Let's go to Joanne on line 1. Go ahead, Joanne. You're on the air.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Joanne.
Hello. I understand you're referring to Bill 62.
Bill 159.
Oh, it's 169, is it?
159.
Okay. I just tuned in a few minutes ago. Having in the recent past worked in a healthcare myself, where we had very stringent confidentiality rules. I was very just shocked that I understood you there to say that the government has been releasing our private personal information.
Well, that's from the Ministry of Transportation, but that's your private personal information at all. And my concern is, if the government is already doing that through the Ministry of Transportation, what's to prevent them from doing it through the Ministry of Health? Can we trust them?
Okay, because my concern was I was afraid it was sort of like closing the barn door after the horse has been let out. But we haven't reached that point then.
No.
Well, actually, no, I do think in some regards it is closing the barn door after the horse has escaped.
One comment I'd like to make with respect to the caller is that individual institutions like hospitals or labs, I'm sure, do have strong confidentiality rules and policies governing their own practices. The problem is there's no consistency as to what those rules are. So there isn't a standard across the board to create a level playing field that all health custodians must meet the standard of confidentiality and protecting people's personal information. And that's what doesn't exist now. You may be fortunate enough to be going into a hospital or an organization that does have good confidentiality and privacy policies, but it's simply at the policy level. Surely, for such sensitive health information, we should have this in legislation.
Indeed. Let's go to Lisa online, too. Go ahead, Lisa. You're on the air.
Yes, I have a couple of questions for Dr. Cavoukian.
Sure.
The first is with the proposed smart card, how much health information would actually be provided electronically? And can people opt out of having detailed health information provided through that source?
Yeah, there's been a lot of, as you say, misconceptions about the smart card.
Actually, I think you will have a great deal of choice. At this point, the only information contemplated existing on the card is comparable to what you have on your existing health card now. And the area where you would have choice is if you want additional emergency related information retained on the card, such as we mentioned earlier, blood type or allergic reactions to various medication, or other critical pieces of information necessary in an emergency. You could choose to have that information put on the card, but it would be under your control and your choice. So I think that's a very positive aspect. Beyond that, it is not, let me repeat, it is not contemplated as storing your medical history or extensive health records. It's just, that's just not on the cards.
Won't the government, though, have to compile a database, though, so that you can access the database using your smart card?
The way it's envisioned now is your basic demographic information, name, address, and health number, would be in a central database that Ministry of Health runs now anyway. And that beyond that, there would be no additional program information or content-based information that others could access, no greater a database than there is now.
Okay.
So I don't think there's reason for concern there.
Okay, let's go to Ann on line 5. Go ahead, Ann, you're on the air.
Oh, thanks very much for taking my call. I believe privacy is extremely important and valuable. And I believe that this current government, while they say they want a smaller government, seems to want a piece of everybody's little life. I mean, why would they care about my health records? And frankly, they want to run the school boards too. And it just surprises me that they're going in this direction. I would like to see the federal government do something across the country to protect us individuals from provincial governments like this. And frankly, I think that the Privacy Council, and I'm sorry, but Ms. Cavoukian, I think it is, I think she's doing an excellent job talking about this. I don't think people realize just how important this is.
Ann, thank you for your call.
It's an uphill battle, and the only thing I would caution the caller, is that it's not only one government, our provincial government versus another. I mean, if I could refer to the federal government, there was this HRDC database that the former federal commissioner of Canada disclosed as having been the Big Brother database, having all this information that was held by the federal government. So I don't think there's any magic to any particular level of government. I think what we have to do is be vigilant in our efforts to have our privacy protected. It's something that I try to do in terms of speaking out as much as I possibly can and raising the awareness of the public and the media, because we have to have the assistance of the public. We have certain powers as an oversight agency, but they're very limited. So unless we have public pressure to help us in ensuring that this privacy bill for health information is truly a privacy protective bill, we can't do it on our own. So I'm very pleased that your caller does in fact believe in privacy, think it's an important right, but we need views like that to be expressed to this existing government so that they know that this is a major concern for the public and the citizens of this province. And I just want to tell her I'll do the best job I can to protect her privacy.
And do you think a lot of people would be surprised, though, to find out just how public their private life could become? Just how easy it is to find out your financial records, your marital status, where you live, your last tax return? It's
disturbing how much information about you is out there. with the advent of the internet and the World Wide Web, that has grown exponentially. There are profiles, personal profiles about you developed anytime you go online. Your clickstream traffic is compiled. There is just endless amounts of personal information that are compiled, and this is frightening, there's no question. But I think what I always try to caution people against the fear that they have lost their privacy. Yeah. I think it's too soon for that. We also, on the opposite side, because there is now a consumer backlash against this use of your personal information without knowledge or consent, there is a consumer backlash. And the growth of the world of electronic commerce, e-commerce that you may have heard about, it hasn't taken off as had been predicted. The success of e-commerce has been very limited specifically because of privacy-related concerns. So I think we have a great deal of power in terms of the consumers, the public, organizing and expressing their views to the government, to business, and saying, I don't want you to use my information for that purpose. You have no right. I haven't given you my consent. I think you're going to see a dramatic change in the way business is conducted in the next decade.
Dr. Ann Cavoukian, our time is gone, but I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
And it's always my pleasure to appear here. Thank you so much, Rhonda.
My pleasure. Don't go away. Phones are fairly busy today, but a couple lines open right now. The number to call, 905-332-3131 or 416-203-0302. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back today to Rhonda London Live. Today we're talking about privacy issues, and you may be very surprised to find out just how public your most private life can become, particularly with the advent of the internet. With his thoughts on all of this, we're joined by Robert Metz. He's the president of the Freedom Party of Ontario. Robert, we've been talking largely today about the Ontario government's proposed legislation, which the aim of the legislation is to protect your privacy, protect your medical records, when in actuality critics say the exact opposite is going to happen, that it's just going to make it legal to have easy access from many different venues.
Well, the government has promised us many times with many types of legislation that they were going to protect our privacy. Primarily the census being one of those things, and then we find out during the last census that of course nobody's privacy was protected and that the information was readily available. I don't know, do you trust that government to use that information wisely, and do you really think that it's going to be kept private? I do not.
I'm not sure that I trust a government that is already selling my personal information gathered through the Ministry of Transportation to outside companies and businesses.
Well, the Ministry of Transportation, what would that be? Your name and address, basically, right? Basically, maybe the kind of license you have. But beyond that, you gave that information to them, and I don't know if there was any clause at the time that you give them that information that guarantees your right to privacy with respect to that.
There's no consent. I'm thinking of, like, perhaps, let's say, a battered woman who has escaped an abusive relationship, doesn't want her address broadcast. I don't think that her ex-spouse should be able to track her down through the Ministry of Transportation.
Well, I agree. That would not be a desirable situation. But really, you know, we don't have a right to privacy per se. What we have is property rights, and we have to protect our privacy using the other rights that we have, of freedom of association. What should be of concern to us is, A, how the government collects the information. Does it collect the information from us through some voluntary system, just passively, or does it force us, compel us to offer that information? That latter one, the compelled one, is the one that I would not support. And secondly, of course, you want to be concerned with what the government does with that information. And unfortunately, today we're in a climate of everything from preventative medicine to preventative crime. And I agree with what Ann just said in the first half of the program, where, for example, they might take something like genetic testing and you're predisposed to a certain situation, which could be medical. It could also be, say, criminal. Maybe they might find that certain types of criminals have tendencies, and then the police will be paying more attention to these people even though they haven't committed a crime or haven't done anything like that. This is very concerning, and I think it's something that we should all be alerted to. With respect to health care records, I think we lost our privacy when we decided to have a public health care system, really.
So if we're going to have a public health care system, should we have, in your opinion, any expectation of privacy?
we should do what we can to legislate that privacy, but it's not the ideal. The information that I may have about you or that you may have about me does not belong to the other person. You probably have a file on me somewhere.
I do.
But that's not my property. That's your property.
Right.
So I don't have a right to that information because, first of all, I assume what you got there, you got through some voluntary means. You didn't force me to give you my address or anything like that. So in that sense, the information that people collect, including companies and businesses that do business with you, is legitimately collected as far as I'm concerned. The area that we're always in trouble with, again, is with the government, where the information's compelled. On the Canadian census, for example, they're asking people everything from how many bathrooms they have in the house to what color their skin is. I think that's rather unacceptable. We've got gun registration in the country now, where people are being forced, in order to keep guns that they may have had for a lifetime or may want to acquire, they now have to provide information, all kinds of it, everything from criminal records to health issues to all sorts of things. And this is the really concerning issue, is what is the government going to do with that information? And how will it possibly use it against its citizens rather than to protect them?
Okay. Let's go to Sid on line 1. He's been waiting very patiently. Go ahead, Sid. You're now on the air.
Yeah, my wife died 4 years ago, and last year I got a form sent to me from her doctor.
Right.
Want me to fill it out so on down the line, because she did have cancer. When she died, she didn't have no cancer. It was all cured all up. She had a pacer, and her heart gave out, and that was it. And I sent it back, but then they sent me a letter of apology. But I never did know her case on the thing with the doctor, because he never let me go in there. So I think that I don't know if they used her record or not.
Okay, so what's your concern, Sid?
Concern is did they go ahead and use her record of her cancer and so on down the line?
I can't answer a personal.
You know, that was a letter from your personal doctor, was it?
Her doctor, not mine. I have a different doctor.
Yeah, you see, I think a solution to a lot of this issue, and there was another related case that came up with this where a patient found out that there were all sorts of false entries on his medical record because of fraud on the part of a doctor that he was going to. I think we could eliminate a lot of these problems if every time a person went to a doctor under socialized medicine here, we at least got some kind of a statement in the mail pointing out to us that we visited the doctor that day, how much was charged to the government, and that way, and an option for you to sign whether you did or did not go to that doctor's appointment, so that we can confirm these things. There's no control on the part of the patient in terms of what the government spends on the patient's behalf. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, because I think we'd all be outraged if we saw the prices, even in terms of just seeing it on a legitimate basis, because then we'd probably start questioning where all the money is going.
Who should own medical records? Should it be your family physician, or should it be you, the person? I mean,
that's a very good question. I think it's both. I think the physician creates his own record, and if you want a duplicate of, and that belongs to him or her, and if you want a duplicate of that record or you want to know about it, they can offer it to you, but if they don't, it's really your responsibility to create your own health record, to keep track of what doctors you've visited, what medications you've taken, because especially today with people moving around and going to their family doctor one time, to emergency another time, maybe to a clinic, the actual medical records are all over the place. They're not necessarily held in one place. And this is something that's puzzled me a bit in terms of what are they actually talking about when they say our health care records. Are they talking about our actual physical condition, our actual health issues that are kept on a record, or are we looking at more primarily issues of billing with the Ontario government, which seems to be largely the case, which of course would be accompanied with a reason for why that money was being expended. And of course, as has been discovered, some doctors are putting through billings for conditions that do not exist with their patients, and those patients cannot correct their medical record and are told by the government that the reason is for administrative and accounting reasons.
Wow.
And, but I can picture the problems from the ministry's point of view, because if they start correcting all these records, they may reveal all sorts of problems with the system. And so now what they're telling people is, we'll leave the record inaccurate, but we can attach a letter to it showing that the record itself is inaccurate and this is your real condition. That concerns me for a number of reasons. Suppose you're an emergency patient in a hospital and they roll you in there and they check your records out to see if you've got any conditions, and there are all these false conditions on your medical record, and they treat you with something that ends up killing you. I mean, your records have to be accurate, I would think.
I would think so too. I'm not a medical doctor, but that seems pretty basic
to me. As a patient, I would want that, that's for sure.
Let's go to Grace on line 2. Go ahead, Grace, you're on the air.
Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Grace.
I would just like to say that I feel our privacy has already been gone for years. I found out a number of years ago that our income tax information is available to anyone who has your name, information on home ownership. You're walking down the street. Oh, who owns that home? You can find out. The Metz directory will tell you who lives in each unit in an apartment, their name, telephone number, number of people living there. So sadly, I feel it's already over for our privacy.
Yeah, Grace, thank you so much for your phone call. I know a lot of people echo that sentiment, that really any privacy that we have right now, it's largely an illusion. And I know exactly what Grace is talking about, a personal story. I bought a house last year. All of a sudden, in the mail, to my new address, I'm getting all of these offers for credit cards, for a line of credit, all these financial offers, just because I bought a house. And I never disclosed that information to anybody.
You probably did, maybe without knowing it. Certainly when you dealt with your real estate agent or however you put the deal together.
I never consented then for that information to be passed on to MasterCard.
Our consent is not always explicit or made in a positive sense. Sometimes we consent to things in a negative way by not doing something to protect our privacy. Which, you know, I agree with Ann where she said if you're in a store and you don't want that store to have your address to send you future mailers, just say no. You can say no.
Just say no.
Unfortunately, you can't say no to the government when they come asking for information that they think that they should have. Now, I have said...
They have ways of making you say yes.
Well, they have, but if you're principled enough about it and you resist, like I haven't filled the census out for the last 2 or 3 census, and I made it very clear publicly, we made an issue of it, that I'm not worried about anything that we're not going to do this, because the government tells you what it's going to do with the information. They use the information to plan the economy. They use the information to create government policies that may favor one racial group against another. They may do all sorts of things that governments in a free society should not be doing. Governments in a free society should be protecting our our real rights, our right to private property, which is the #1 thing that will protect your privacy. We should have the right to private health care if we want it, and then this wouldn't even be an issue. The issue of helping people who can't help or can't pay for their health care is an entirely separate issue. But if you want to benefit, or if you want to do business even with anyone, you have to trade some sort of information.
Indeed.
Certainly, even if you want to pay by check, your check has to have some basic information about you in case something goes wrong with it. And surely you want that information from the other party as well, so that what you're doing really is trading it in terms of a contract to make the contract viable. Because it would be pretty bad if your check bounced and you couldn't locate the person.
I want to talk to you more about that. We have to take a commercial break. Couple phone lines open right now. The number to call is 416-203-0302. We're back with more right after this. Welcome back to Rhonda London Live. Today we're talking about privacy issues, and you may be surprised, even horrified to learn just how very public your most private life can become. Just a few clicks of a computer keyboard and people can access your financial information, your credit information, even your health records as it exists right now. We're joined in studio by Robert Metz of the Freedom Party. Phone's quite busy. I want to take as many calls as we can today. Let's go to Jack on line 5. Go ahead, Jack. You're on the air.
Hi there.
Hi, Jack.
Corporations have been utilizing information for the purpose of disentitlement and advancing their managerial initiatives for quite some time now. Corporations like to employ whole medical departments and ask employees to go see the nurse or go see that. And meanwhile, the medical department is not empowered to administer health care. Their sole purpose, and of course they'd never admit this, is to allow the corporations to bypass medical confidentiality. A great offender that uses this process by hiring third-party practitioners is the WSIB. We have absolutely no privacy that's respected. In their own ways, privacy is no longer something that you enjoy, and if they're going to be honest about it, the social insurance number is part of why we can no longer enjoy privacy in any way. There's the right to access information, and employers and insurance companies have been doing this for a year. Now they don't even care if they're caught because there's no means of enforcing your privacy.
Yeah, and Jack, to be truthful, there's no law, too.
Yes, but I agree with the caller there about the social insurance number. That was basically the beginning of the end right there. And of course, when it was first introduced, everybody said it was only going to be used for a limited number of things. And the next thing, now we're in a situation where everyone from commercial interests to the government uses it. And that wasn't its original intention. But it does make it easier to track somebody. But to look at the broader issue, you have to realize everybody in society acts in their own self-interest. And in order to relate to each other, we want as much information about each other as we can get. And the legitimate way to get it is through some consensual means. Employers generally get it because on the application form you are consenting to certain things that you may consider violate your right to privacy. But if you want that job, that's the price you have to pay to get the job. So in that sense, when you sign on the application line, you have waived that right to your privacy. And as much as you might not like it, that's the price that you were willing to pay to be considered for that job. And if they do find things out about you that may, for whatever reason, not make you the ideal candidate for what they're looking for, be it employer or whatever other relationship, then that association may not take place. And that's something that everyone's concerned about, and one of the reasons we want to protect our privacy. Is there an absolute answer to this? I don't think so. I don't see too much of a threat from the private market because at least there you can go somewhere else. Whereas with the government, you're stuck with that government. That government is there from dawn to dusk, so that you don't have that kind of protection. And it's almost unfortunate that we need a privacy commissioner in a way because we have become such a socialized country that all our information is being shared, which is inevitable with a country that is redistributing the wealth so much. They have to know who's got money, who hasn't got money, what their circumstances are, and so that they can target one group as a higher tax-paying group, give them to the lower tax-paying group, and we kind of give up our privacy in the whole process. But I don't think it's the end of the world. I think you still have a certain amount of privacy. Even, I can't imagine the kind of problems that some very high-profile actors may have or high-profile politicians. They're already at the point where they don't have a private life, really, and whatever they get for privacy, they have to pay for and pay for dearly, hiring special protection and things like this. I just can't imagine some of the things that people like the former Princess Di had to go through. With the media and all that. There's a whole other issue relating to privacy.
Robert Metz, our time has gone, but I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Terrific.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more Rhonda London Live and news from our medical files right after these messages. Stay tuned. We're back right after this. From our medical files today, people suffer an average of 2 to 6 colds every year. And as of yet, there is no known cure for the common cold. Pharmacies and stores that carry alternative medicine therapies are stocked with natural remedies claiming to treat colds. But do they actually work? CNN's Rhonda Rowland looks for the answer.
This is Devonna Beard on a Thursday, sick with a cold, feeling miserable. Here she is on Monday, 4 days later, being tested to see if the zinc lozenges she used to fight her cold actually worked.
Saturday, really no symptoms, some congestion. Sunday, no congestion at all. Today, I'm all better.
Her physician, Dr. Ananda Prasad, published a study in the Annals of Internal Medicine that looked at zinc lozenges in the common cold. It included 48 patients.
We showed that by giving zinc lozenges, the duration of cold was almost 50% decreased, and severity was also decreased.
This is just one of at least 10 careful studies evaluating zinc lozenges for the common cold. Half the study showed zinc shortens the duration of cold symptoms. The other half showed it did not. Which studies do consumers trust?
In spite of the fact that these studies have been repeated and that the designs have been modified in a way to try to make the studies more valid, we continue to see this disparity in the final results of the study.
Dr. Turner, a noted cold remedy researcher, says he studied the same types of zinc as other researchers with very similar protocols and found no benefit. He also studied another natural cold treatment, the herb echinacea. Here again, he found it did not work, though he points out it's still possible that echinacea works.
It's important to realize that echinacea is not just one thing. So it's impossible to say, based on a single study, that echinacea does or doesn't work.
Herbal industry experts say Americans spend about $400 million per year on zinc and echinacea cold treatments. Since natural remedies such as these are loosely regulated by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and are on store shelves despite conflicting evidence on whether or not they work, how are consumers to know who to believe? According to some manufacturers, their products sell because of word of mouth. If it works wonders for one patient, he or she may pass the word. But the fact that a single patient feels better after taking a certain remedy does not prove it had any real effect. Experts say some people may feel better because they believe a treatment will work, a phenomenon called the placebo effect, which has been shown to be very powerful. So some cold patients could be a testament to the power of zinc and other natural remedies, or a testament to the power of belief. Rhonda Rowland, CNN.
Don't go away. I'll be right back with a preview of what's coming up tomorrow on Rhonda London Live right after this. That's our show for today. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow on Rhonda London Live, the campaign to repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code continues. That's a section that allows parents to spank their children. We'll bring you up to date and look at all the issues involved with some very different opinions. That's coming up tomorrow. I hope you'll join me. In the meantime, have a great day.
You're watching CTN.